My name is Renee Campbell, and I am a research associate at the Asian American Comparative Collection, also called the AACC for short. The AACC is a teaching, study, and research collection that is housed in the Alfred W. Bowers Laboratory of Anthropology on the University of Idaho campus here in Moscow, Idaho. The AACC is a curated collection of comparative objects, archaeological artifacts, historical documents, images, and textual resources that support research related to Asian American heritage. Today I want to share with you the significance of one of the many items in the AACC, this Highlander beer bottle. This bottle was acquired by the AACC's founder and volunteer curator, Dr. Priscilla Wagers, as part of her research on Idaho's former Kooskia Internment camp. Though it is less well known than many World War II incarceration and detention camps, there is a growing body of research related to the Kooskia Internment camp. 2 books authored by Dr. Wagers, an archaeological project led by Dr. Stacy Camp, a scrapbook of photographs digitized by the University of Idaho's Special Collections, and documents on file in the National Archives, the AACC, and elsewhere provide a rich historical record for this site, and it is through sources like these that we are able to reconstruct the connection between this beer and other basic rites at the Kooskia Internment camp.
The Kooskia Internment Camp, located in north-central Idaho, was one of 9 internment camps used during World War II as incarceration facilities for Japanese nationals, who, often based on hearsay and little to no evidence, were imprisoned by the United States government. Kooskia was, in many ways, a satellite to the Fort Missoula internment camp, located across the state line in Montana, but was unique as the only work camp in the United States for Japanese internees. Although detainment was far from a just process, the U.S. government's classification of the men in the Kooskia internment camp as alien internees did at least place them under the jurisdiction of the Geneva Convention, and because Article 34 of the Geneva Convention prohibited forced labor, internees had to voluntarily transfer to the Kooskia internment camp and were entitled to earn wages for the work they performed while there. Under these unique circumstances, Kooskia's so-called internee laborers were entitled to rights not afforded to internees in other facilities or to Japanese Americans incarcerated in War of Relocation Authority camps. The fact that they were entitled to these rights, however, did not mean that the men imprisoned in the Kooskia internment camp were initially granted them. Between May of 1943 and May of 1945, the Kooskia internment camp held approximately 265 men of Japanese ancestry, though only about 200 lived there at any given time. These men came from all over the United States and from Mexico. Some were even kidnapped from Panama and Peru. All of them had been previously imprisoned in other Immigration and Naturalization Service, INS, camps, and had voluntarily transferred in order to be closer to family members, for the chance to earn money, or for other reasons. They arrived to find an already constructed facility located in the remote wilderness of Idaho. The camp was so remote, in fact, that authorities had not felt it necessary to fence it, even though it had operated as a prison labor camp since 1935. Letters written upon arrival indicate that the camp facilities, its lack of a fence, its rugged terrain, and the opportunity to earn wages of $55 to $65 per month were all perceived as welcome changes. Though still imprisoned, at least initially, Kooskia seemed to many better than their previous circumstances. A few of the men transferred to the Kooskia internment camp worked support jobs, cooking, doing laundry, or working in the mechanic shop, for example. But most were construction workers, tasked with building a road along the margin of the wild and scenic Lochsaw River that extended into Montana through the Bitterroot Range. As the men familiarized themselves with life in the Kooskia internment camp and began construction on what would become Highway 12, contradictions between what they were promised and what they experienced started to surface. Feelings of mistreatment were exacerbated by a camp superintendent who had previously supervised prison laborers and tended to treat the Kooskia internees as such, and who also routinely ignored or dismissed their concerns. And so, in July of 1943, the men in the Kooskia internment camp composed a petition outlining their complaints and sent it to the officer in charge of the Fort Missoula internment camp in Montana. This petition was written in Japanese and had to be translated for the officials at Fort Missoula. Unfortunately, only the English translation survives, but even from this document, it is clear that the men in the Kooskia internment camp were voicing detailed and legitimate concerns that were based on their knowledge of the terms of the Geneva Convention and directives issued by INS. Leveraging their knowledge of the rights guaranteed by these documents, their voluntary transfer to the Kooskia internment camp, and the importance of their labor, the petitioners left INS little room to dispute their claims. For its part, the United States government also had a vested interest in addressing these concerns. The men in the Kooskia internment camp were not only essential workers on a road-building project that was deemed to be a national military priority, but they were also seen as a form of wartime insurance. Under the Geneva Convention, the Kooskia internment camp was subject to regular inspections, including by Spanish officials, who acted as proxies for the Japanese government. Because these officials made reports to Japan, the United States government worried that mistreatment of Japanese internees would cause retaliation by the Japanese government against American prisoners of war. Following this petition, authorities reacted swiftly to correct conditions at the Kooskia internment camp. Over the next few months, a doctor was transferred to the camp, dental care was made available, and much-needed safety equipment materialized. Administrative and procedural changes were also put into effect to improve both working and living conditions at the camp. Among the basic rights protected by the Geneva Convention and invoked by the men in the Kooskia internment camp were access to recreational pursuits and to food and drink rations equal in quantity and quality to that of American troops at base camps. While these rights may seem minor when compared to adequate dental care or access to a doctor, they were essential to regaining a sense of control and normalcy, however small, in the daily lives of prisoners who had been uprooted from their homes and families, isolated in an unfamiliar wilderness, and classified as enemy aliens by the United States government. As stated in their petition, living in a no man's land and engaging in unaccustomed work made the men feel quite lonely, and proper recreational facilities were a necessary step towards making their lives happier and brighter while imprisoned. In response to the petition, opportunities for recreational activities increased. The Kooskia internment camp began showing movies 3 nights a week, and weekly schedules were posted on a blackboard in English and Japanese. The men could also listen to the radio in their free time, participate in dance, drama, or musical groups, garden, practice arts such as drawing, painting, woodworking, stone crafting, and weaving, and they could also visit the canteen. Articles 11 and 12 of the Geneva Convention specifically entitled internees to establish a camp canteen. Although the items sold were subject to approval and the accounts were regularly audited by INS staff, the men imprisoned in the Kooskia internment camp operated their canteen and divided its profits as they saw fit, which included providing for their communal welfare. According to interviews, photographs, and official documents, the Kooskia canteen sold cigarettes, gum, candy, novelties, clothes, slippers, soap, shaving items, writing materials, sewing supplies, and more. Workers who earned less money received a monthly $3 credit at the canteen, which could be used for extra food, tobacco, toiletries, or even beer. You may recognize the label on this bottle of Highlander beer from the example in the AACC collection. The right to sell beer in the Kooskia camp canteen was a particular point of contention between administration and prisoners at the Kooskia internment camp. Internees were aware that it was available at other internment camps, like the one in Fort Meade, Maryland, and that the Geneva Convention entitled them to the same daily ration of 1 beer a day that American troops enjoyed. Yet even after permission to sell beer had been granted, Camp Superintendent Dean Reamer seemed determined to obstruct access to it, first by refusing to apply for the necessary permits, later by failing to sign ration cards, and then by opposing supply runs. In these instances, other camp employees eventually interceded on behalf of the prisoners, but it was not until after Superintendent Reamer was replaced that beer could be reliably stocked and sold in the canteen. From photographs and documents, it appears that Highlander beer was the brand most frequently sold in the canteen. Brewed in Missoula, Montana by the Highlander Beer Company between 1910 and 1964, except during Prohibition, Highlander was distributed throughout the region. This historic sign, for example, still exists on a building in Butte, Montana. Former Kooskia internment camp employees recall having cases of beer shipped from Fort Missoula, or, on at least one occasion, driving beer back to the camp from Missoula by truck. During World War II, Highlander beer was also sold at the Lochsaw Lodge, located east of the Kooskia internment camp along the route of Highway 12. Former Kooskia internment camp employees would likely have driven by this lodge on their supply runs made to Fort Missoula. For the men in the Kooskia internment camp who oversaw the operation of the canteen, and for those who browsed the shelves to purchase the food, drinks, including Highlander beer, and personal items that they desired, these acts restored a small degree of control to their daily routine. And while these small acts were, in fact, basic rights promised to them under the terms of the Geneva Convention and INS directives, It was likely empowering to know that it was their own knowledge, actions, and persistence that had ultimately made these acts possible. With the administrative, staff, and procedural changes that followed the petition, life in the Kooskia internment camp became more tolerable. Camp administrators' relationship with the men imprisoned in the Kooskia internment camp improved, as did their respect for internee rights, safety, and well-being. As the men continued the construction work that was regarded as a national military priority, they now had the option of enjoying a hard-earned beer, attending a movie, or otherwise recreating at the end of their day. By their own resourcefulness and initiative, the men in the Kooskia internment camp were able to restore moments of normalcy and comfort to their lives. In the diary that he kept while imprisoned, Reverend Hosen Seki, founder and minister of the New York Buddhist Church, noted the homesickness and captivity that he felt in the Kooskia internment camp. But he also mentions moments of enjoyment and hope. On April 22, 1944, Seki commented that spring had arrived with little wild flowers which peeped out for lovely sunshine, and that this, and beer, made him feel, at least temporarily, okay. Beers sold at the Kooskia internment camp canteen contributed to some of these moments of enjoyment, but were also facets of basic rights, as defined by the provisions of the Geneva Convention and INS directives. The Highlander beer bottle in the AACC collection is a reminder of the determination and resourcefulness by which the men in the Kooskia internment camp secured these basic rights, respect from camp administration, and moments of leisure, all while imprisoned in an isolated and unfamiliar wilderness. Cheers to them. And thank you for watching this presentation. More information about the Kooskia internment camp can be found at the following links, and also in Dr. Priscilla Wager's 2010 book, Imprisoned in Paradise, Japanese Internee Road Workers at the World War II Kooskia Internment Camp.